we are in Israel at Nazareth Village. Nazareth Village is located on a site that was remarkably untouched and unchanged since the time of Jesus. In fact, Nazareth Village preserves the last remaining fields, most likely worked by Jesus' friends, family, and fellow villagers.
Shoots growing from the root. Those new shoots are new trees. They can be transplanted with a piece of the root, they put down new roots, and they become new trees.
It's an olive tree?
Yes. In Isaiah 11:1, we read that a new shoot will come out of the stump of Jesse. You familiar with this prophecy?
Yep. Yeah.
And Jesse is?
Son of
The father of King David. And if you recall, I mentioned Judeans established Nazareth, coming from the south, from the city of King David and around it. They established a village of the north and called it Nazareth. We believe it's based on the shoot in conjunction with the prophecy, because shoot in Hebrew is netzer or netzer. Can you say that? Netzer?
Netzer.
And this is where we believe Nazareth got its Hebrew name. Netzer, whatever you want to pronounce your R's. And yes, our oldest tree has been transplanted from a local farm. It's at least 400 years old. It's this one right here. Usually in that field over there, we'll have wheat growing, harvested wheat. We get here, we get in a pile here in the middle. And then those sledges, we have a donkey tied to the sledge. This is the right side up, upside down. So we have holes and we have stones lodged into these holes. The donkey will go in circles, and little by little, the farmer with this winnowing fork will grab a little bit at a time. And that's what crushes the wheat head, separating the chaff from the kernels, and waiting for a slight breeze, throw a little in the air to kind of filter out some of the lighter chaff, and then they'll continue filtering it until they reach the kernels and then store it. But we have this to connect you to one of the incidents in the Bible where Jesus and some of his disciples were walking through a field similar to this one on a Sabbath, and they were collecting whatever they could find from the wheat head left behind. They were hungry, so they were grabbing it, crushing it, and eating the kernel. So what they were doing kind of mimics what the farmer, the donkey, the sledge, the basically that's why they were accused of working on Sabbath. It's kind of a stretch, right? It's kind of like what we do when we eat sunflower seeds. So they were accused of working on the Sabbath, but Jesus had a good answer for them and told them that Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Will have usually a mixture of goats and sheep. Goats and sheep are very different animals, not just in how they look, but their attitude as well. Sheep by nature are very obedient as an animal, whereas goats are not. First century. This here is a rich man or rich family's tomb. Back then, common people and poor people will be buried in a hole in the ground. Inside, you'll find niches and chambers carved in the walls of the bedrock for different family members. So this tomb is not just for one person, it's for the whole family. Now, we know Jesus used a tomb like this. However, he wasn't a rich man himself. So Joseph of Arimathea was gracious enough to lend him the tomb But 3 days later, he returned it, so they were good. But the burial preparation happens within 24 hours of death. First, you have to cleanse the body with oils and spices. You wrap it with linen, and then transfer it outside. After about a year later, they come back to what's called a second burial, where they'll collect the bones of the decomposed bodies, they'll put it in ossuaries or stone boxes, and transfer it back inside. Okay, so this area was pretty different than what you see here. We had to do a lot of digging and unearthing. While we were doing so, one of the archaeologists on the team, who had a trained eye, saw that there was a corner carved in the bedrock that was not natural, that was man-made. After much inspection and research, they identified it to be that wine press we mentioned. Over here is the square-cut vat that they would lay the grapes on. Take off their shoes or sandals, they'll start pressing away on the grapes, and the juices start flowing through the groove and fill in this carved chamber. And they'll collect the grape juice and store it for fermentation for it to become what's known as new wine. They continued digging and they found these terraces. These were also original terraces. When I say original, I mean they're not replicas like the tomb is. These date back from the time of the They continued digging, they couldn't find anything else, just more terraces as you can see. So they thought to themselves, maybe if we go across the street and dig there, we'll find more things. Well, they dug there and they found remains of 3 watchtowers. They brought the foundational stones back and reconstructed 1 watchtower from the original sites. So this just confirms more and more that this here is farmland of 1st century Nazareth. The tower is not military use, it's for farmers to watch over their crops, make sure no one steals from them or no animals come in and sabotage the plants and so forth. It's also better to plan a farm when you're overlooking the land. And the town is very small, 300-400 people. We know Jesus grew up here and spent most of his life here, most of his childhood here. And we also know about wine season that it's a community effort. There's a lot of moving parts for wine season. It happens towards the end of the summer. You'll see friends, family, and neighbors come together to do this. You can imagine 30-40 people harvesting the grapes, other people transferring it down the mountain, people pressing on the grapes. Usually women and children, by the way, will do this because their feet are softer and cleaner. Maybe slipping and falling, laughing at each other, some singing and dancing and music going on. It's very festive and celebratory. Whoever lives through it will definitely remember it and definitely participate in it. So if we string all these pieces of information together, we can easily come to the conclusion that Jesus left this wine press as a kid, growing up in this community in Nazareth.
I just have a minor question. The new wine, is there like any definition on that? I mean, I would assume there'd be at the beginning of the fermentation process, but some people claim it was just grape juice. I was just wondering if we have any clarification on that at all.
There are obviously differing opinions, and there's never something that we can guarantee. But from the research we've done on this, is that the first week or two, couple of weeks, it really wouldn't have an alcohol.
Right.
Maybe it'll be point something, maybe 1%.
Kind of like a kombucha, like a probiotic.
Delosh, it's called. And yes, it'll cleanse itself, but not enough. If you leave it just a week or a week and a half, it won't really have enough to build. Building terraces is, I'm sorry?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's a laborious job. It takes a lot of effort and time. First you have to carve the mountainside into these large steps, and you have to bring all this raw material up the mountain 1 donkey load at a time. And you have to layer the different layers we talked about, the white chalky layer, the topsoil, and build the stone wall. You have to stack these stones up with perfect precision. And if you notice, there's no mud or mortar between the stones. This is to allow the water to flow through. So when you buy a field, because these fields belong to different farmers, so not just for one farmer, so they tend to exchange hands quite a bit. They buy and sell. When you buy a field, you have to make sure you're getting a good one that's well built and well maintained. So, the parable that says a man set up a banquet and sent out for invitations. You're familiar with this one?
Yeah.
One of the responses pertaining to fields were, I just bought a field and I must inspect it. Now, keep in mind, it takes a lot of effort, like we mentioned. It also takes about a year for a family to build a quarter acre of these terraces. So he had a very valid reason. Or did he? What was the problem with the statement? Okay, let me ask you another question. Do you buy a car and then test drive it? Yeah, why would you buy a field before you inspect it? So it was an obvious excuse, it was a bad excuse, but moreover, it was an insult to the intelligence of the person inviting you. Because everyone knows back then that you have to inspect these fields before you buy them. Of a first century olive press. This is where we make olive oil. So olive oil happens in two steps, in two phases. The first one is the crushing of the olives. So in October, November, and sometimes early December, we harvest the olives, we bring it in baskets, and we dump it in this basin here along with the pit and everything. So the whole olive goes in there, from the tree to the pit, or the basin. Then we tie a donkey around this yoke or harness, and the donkey would go in circles dragging this 500-kilogram stone around and around to crush the olives and turn it into olive mash or olive paste. Then that mash is collected and put in the pockets of these baskets all around. And then we take it to phase 2. After we tuck it in, we take it to step number 2. We pile them 10 to 15 high, so it comes up to here, depending on the thickness of the baskets. And we press them 3 times. The first time is when we just let them sit there and allow for weight and gravity to do the work. So all that oil that gently seeps out is the best oil. It's the purest oil. It's what some people may call or consider the virgin oil. That oil is used to further the kingdom of God by transferring it to the temple, to light the menorah, to anoint kings and prophets, and so forth. The second and third presses is when we start using these beams of trees that are tied to a pulley system. We start lowering the ropes down. That's when it starts coming down from here, squeezing the baskets for more oil. That second press produces oil that's still fairly good, and it's used for everyday use, like cooking, cleaning, making perfume, and medicine. The third press is when they just apply more and more pressure on those same baskets through different methods. One of the methods are these stones. These are 1/2 ton each. They are tied to a winch that's connected to the mother beam. And using these levers, they start squeezing down, applying more pressure down here on the baskets, on the same baskets. We haven't removed the baskets yet, except to collect the oil in between the presses. And that third press produces oil that's no longer good. Because that's when you start getting the pulp and the skin to break loose and go into the juice mix to create a very foggy and dense oil that's actually no longer green. It starts becoming a rusty, reddish, brownish color. Because you have black pulp mixed with the green oil, it gives it that rusty color. Now, even though that oil is not very good, it still has a very important use for it. And that is to light lamps or to make olive oil soap. 2 very important uses, essential uses.
making?
Scroll holder.
Oh, of course.
So, again, saying hi to Joseph. Joseph is our carpenter. He does the woodwork here at the village, so anything you see made out of wood is actually made by Joseph, using first century tools and living in first century conditions. So, some of these people are not just actors or posers. They actually do the work necessary to sustain the village. So, if the village needs a new ladder, they'll do it here. Working on scroll holders, as you see. And as you can see, these replicas of first century tools, they look familiar to you because carpentry tools haven't really evolved much for 2,000 years because they get the job done. So the chisels, we still have chisels today. This is called an adze, spelled A-D-Z-E. It has two uses for it. The first one is the peeling and shaping of the wood. The other side is used as a hammer. The only thing you probably don't see much are these basalt stones, or basalt stones. The rough one is used for sanding the wood. The smooth one is for sharpening the tools. This is a hand plane. We all know what a hand or planer is, right? Now, we are here, however, to shed light on a misconception that Jesus and Joseph were carpenters. It is not entirely true. The Greek word is tekton, which means artisan. Someone who works with their hands are skilled with their hands. And people who usually work with their hands and know how to use and shape different materials, they'll actually use different materials. They won't stick to one thing. And when you're an artisan, you will build and create things, right? So we believe the misconception came from when Europeans translated the Bible. In Europe, much like the U.S., forestry is dense, and most of the things built or created are made out of wood, especially the more you go back in time. Here, if we look at, for example, this building, this house, it's mainly made out of stone, with the help of wood, but mainly stone, because we have a lot of limestone in these mountains, and they're safer that way to build your home out of stone. So we believe the thought process went about like this. They are builders and they are artisans. That means they build stuff and then create stuff, so they also must build homes. Our homes are made of wood, so they must be carpenters. They kind of stuck on. But now we see the better image, and that what they are, they're not just carpenters. Yes, you see carpentry tools here, but if you look behind you, you'll see masonry tools and a bedrock as well. So we believe they were skilled in both. These were the two most common materials. Start from the very beginning with our sheep. They are sheared using a replica of first century shears or scissors. They bring the wool here and they wash it. First they cut away any straw, any dirt, anything stuck in the wool because it's tangled in there, so use a smaller version of this. And then sometimes we wash it in that tub. Back then they would use running water. And then we dye it. We have to give it color. We didn't have artificial dyes, so we had to be creative by finding things around the village. So for example, onion peels. You would put onion peels in water, add salt and vinegar to extract the colors, boil the water, then wait for the water to slightly cool off because you don't want to dip wool in boiling water. And that will give us colors similar to these, depending on how long you leave the wool inside the water. We do the same thing with other things like pomegranate peels. And that we have 3 different shades of pomegranate, so that will give us the burnt orange, maroon, burgundy colors. Now, pecans will give you sort of a candy color. So it's a mixture of greenish, pinkish gray. Now we have the basic colors of the sheep that you saw down there, the brown, the tan, the off-white. Those are not dyed. Those are just the natural colors. Usually worn by commoners, people who cannot afford colored clothes, or for everyday working clothes. Like when we talked about making wine, they'll probably just wear these colors that way. If they ruin them, it's not going to be that expensive like a dye. And someone with an expensive taste would like to wear a Banana Republic suit would wear this color. And this is made from saffron. Then finally, you have these colors that are designated to royalty. Kings and queens would wear this, and these are made from sea snails. Sea snails would have that ink in their mucus or blood system, sort of like octopi and squid maybe. They'll take the snail out, they'll twist it to get 1 drop of ink per snail. So you need about 6,000 or 7,000 of these to make 1 kilogram of wool. That's why it's so expensive. Even the guy with the Gucci suit can't afford this. This is only for kings and queens. And then they would dry it and separate it by hand and then card it using this carding comb to separate the threads from itself. And Hannah will show us how yarn is spun using the spindle and her patience. That's yarn. And like I said, it takes a lot of time and patience. Then, worst thing about it is you can't immediately enjoy using it. Why? Because it keeps coiling or curling back on itself. So it's annoying to use to work with. You have to leave it on a spindle or in a ball of yarn for about 4 or 5 weeks until it rests. Then it becomes manageable. Then we can hang it on the loom using these clay weights at the bottom. And after the weaving process, we are finished with this beautiful garment, all made here, all made authentic from A to Z, from sheep to shawl. Let's thank Hannah for her hard work.
And I want to thank all of you for visiting me. Nice to meet you and welcome. Have a good evening and God bless you. Love you. Bye-bye.
Go downstairs. There's red on the right if you need. This is a full-size replica of a 1st century synagogue. This is the only full-size replica of a synagogue in the Bible. You will see a lot of synagogues, but some will be missing a roof, or missing a wall, or missing a projector. You know what synagogues are. This is the only fully built one. And no, there were no projectors. When you walked in here, same as the olive press, you felt the sense of coolness of being inside, right? That's how the structure is built. We've done extensive research to make sure all these buildings were built, not only using first-century building materials, but also first-century engineering methods as well. So you probably noticed the windows very high up, right? What happens to hot air? It rises. And they are narrow and parallel to one another. That creates a ventilation system. So hot air is constantly rising, it circulates or scatters, finds its way out, and leaves the room with this sensation. Then you have these stones that you're sitting on, and over here, they're very large. There are not enough hours in the day to heat them fully back up, so they maintain the coolness from the night before, and that also neutralizes the heat. It's not the best contrast right now because it's the end of the day and it's the end of the summer as well. So throughout the days, it's been heating and heating and heating to maintain the level. But usually, in the middle of the summer, you'll find very cold stones. Now, let's look at the ceiling. This is one of the ways how they used to make the ceilings back then. First, they start by laying these beams of trees across. And you have a layer of reed on top of that. Then you have a layer of mud, and you can see the mud in between the broken reeds, right? That mud is made from water, limestone, ash, dirt, and straw. Then you have a layer of dry dirt on top of that, which is there to absorb rainwater. And then it's finally finished off with another layer of mud that's rolled down with a stone roller to give it that tough exterior, kind of like what we've been walking on all day long. So, from this information, we know that it's possible to dig through a roof. You know what I'm talking about? Yes. So, you dig through the first 3 layers of mud. You break the reed and you lower a person down between the beams of trees. Back then, the beams of trees were a lot farther apart. Today, we had to do it real close like this for city code. But the synagogue is the heart of the village. It's a community center. It's a civic center. It's where people come together, yes, on a Sabbath and then throughout the week, they come use it for prayer and worship. But the rest of the days of the week and in between prayers, they'll use it for whatever the village needs it to be at the time. Now keep in mind, this is a small community of 300, 400, 500 people. You don't need a different building for every activity the village engages in, right? If it's there to resolve a dispute between two people, it becomes a courthouse. If you want to learn a new language, it becomes a school. Or just a place to socialize, for people to come together and talk about the world, discuss politics, argue about religion, whatever. But we are here for one story only. We mentioned two things happened in Nazareth. The Annunciation, and when Jesus walked into the synagogue. So this is what happened. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. Then he went to fast for 40 days in the wilderness. Then he came back to the Galilee area, and he was tried by Satan, by the way. Then he came back to the Galilee area and entered a synagogue in Nazareth, actually very similar to this one, size and shape. This holds about 200-300 people. And at the time, you can imagine the synagogue being very full, because people started hearing more and more about Jesus, about his performance of miracles, about his teaching, and so forth. So Jesus walks in, probably sits with the crowd. They identify Jesus in the crowd and ask him to come up and read from one of the scrolls. So they handed him the scroll of Isaiah. Jesus picks up the scroll, opens it, navigates in it, and finds where it says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bring freedom to the prisoners, the recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he abruptly stops right there, rolls the scroll, and gives it to the attendant. The attendant may place it in an urn, similar to this one. The urn is transferred later on to the storage room to protect the scroll from disintegration, sat back down, and continued talking to the people. Where he added, "Today, this prophecy is fulfilled with your hearing."